The North American Rockwell OV-10 Bronco is an American turboprop light attack and observation aircraft. It was developed in the 1960s as a special aircraft for counter-insurgency combat, and one of its primary missions was as a forward air control aircraft. It can carry up to 3 tons of external munitions, internal loads such as paratroopers or stretchers, and can loiter for 3 or more hours. Development. Background. The aircraft was initially conceived in the early 1960s through an informal collaboration between W. H. Beckett and Colonel K. P. Rice, U.S. Marine Corps, who met at Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake, California, and who also happened to live near each other. The original concept was for a rugged, simple, close air support aircraft integrated with forward ground operations. At the time, the U.S. Army was still experimenting with armed helicopters, and the U.S. Air Force was not interested in close air support. The concept aircraft was to operate from expedient forward air bases using roads as runways. Speed was to be from very slow to medium subsonic, with much longer loiter times than a pure jet. Efficient turboprop engines would give better performance than piston engines. Weapons were to be mounted on the centerline to get efficient unranged aiming like the Lockheed P-38 Lightning and North American F-86 Sabre aircraft. The inventors favored strafing weapons such as self-loading recoilless rifles, which could deliver aimed explosive shells with less recoil than cannons, and a lower per-round weight than rockets. The airframe was to be designed to avoid the backblast. Beckett and Rice developed a basic platform meeting these requirements, then attempted to build a fiberglass prototype in a garage. The effort produced enthusiastic supporters and an informal pamphlet describing the concept. W. H. Beckett, who had retired from the Marine Corps, went to work at North American Aviation to sell the aircraft. Rice states, "The military definition of STOL allows takeoff and landing in most of the areas in which limited war might be fought. In addition, the airplane was designed to use roads so that operation would even be possible in jungle areas where clearings are few and far between. As a result, the wingspan was to be limited to 20 feet and a heavy trailing arm-type landing gear with a tread of 6.5 feet was provided for operation from roads. Float operation was to be feasible. It is quite feasible to design the various components so that it can be disassembled easily and stored in a box that would fit in a 6x6 truck bed, together with the equipment needed for reassembly in the field. It could thus be transported by amphibious shipping and either heli-lifted or driven ashore by a 6x6 truck. Light Armed Reconnaissance Aircraft. A tri-service specification for the Light Armed Reconnaissance Aircraft was approved by the U.S. Navy, Air Force and Army and was issued in late 1963. The LARA requirement was based on a perceived need for a new type of jungle-fighting, versatile, light attack and observation aircraft. Existing military aircraft in the observation role, such as the Cessna 01 Bird Dog and Cessna 02 Skymaster, were perceived as obsolescent, with too slow a speed and too small a load capacity for this flexible role. The specification called for a twin-engine, 2-man aircraft that could carry at least 2,400 pounds of cargo, 6 paratroopers or stretchers, and be stressed for +8 and -3 gs. It also had to be able to operate from an aircraft carrier, fly at least 350 miles per hour, take off in 800 feet and convert to an amphibian. Various armaments had to be carried, including 4 7.62 mm machine guns with 2,000 rounds, and external weapons including a 20 mm gun pod and AIM-9 sidewinder air-to-air missiles. 11 proposals were submitted, including the Grumman Model 134, a tandem-seat version of the already fielded U. Army's OV-1 Mohawk, Goodyear GAR-39, Beechcraft PD-183, Douglas D-855, Convair Model 48 Charger, Helio 1320, Lockheed CL-760, a Martin design, and the North American Aviation Rockwell NA-300. In August 1964, the NA-300 was selected. A contract for 7 prototype aircraft was issued in October 1964. Convair protested the decision and built a small wing prototype of the Model 48 Charger anyway, which first flew on the 29th of November 1964. This was also a twin-boom aircraft that had a broadly similar layout to the OV-10. The Charger, while capable of outperforming the OV-10 in some respects, crashed on the 19th of October 1965 after 196 test flights. Convair subsequently dropped out of contention. The Bronco started flying midway through the Charger's test program on the 16th of July 1965, and became one of the premier counter-insurgency aircraft of the next 30 years. It did not achieve Rice's L2VMA concept because the DoD insisted on 40-foot-long wings, which made it depend on air bases. Rice concludes, the original concept of a small, simple aircraft that could operate close to the supported troops had been almost completely eviscerated by the system. The ability to operate from roads had been ignored, and performance compromised by the short 30-feet span. The extra 1,000 pounds for the rough field landing gear and another 1,000 pounds of electronics. The light, simple airplane also had a full complement of instruments, ejection seats and 7 external store stations. The concept of using ground ordnance in a bomb bay had been ignored, although it did have provisions for 4 M60 machine guns. In spite of this growth, the OV-10 still had great potential. It would not achieve the advantages of integration with the ground scheme of maneuver, but it did have capabilities at the low end of the performance envelope that were still valuable and unique. The Bronco performed observation, forward air control, helicopter escort, armed reconnaissance, utility light air transport and limited ground attack. The Bronco has also performed aerial radiological reconnaissance, tactical air observation, artillery and naval gunfire spotting, airborne control of tactical air support operations and frontline, low-level aerial photography. A prototype in Vietnam designed to lay smoke was extremely successful, kept in service by evaluators for several months, and only reluctantly released, was not purchased due to a perceived lack of mission. Possible modernized variant. Boeing has recently put together plans internally to build a modernized, improved version of the Bronco, called the OV-10X, to satisfy a possible Air Force requirement for a light attack plane. According to Pentagon and industry officials, while the aircraft would maintain much of its 1960s vintage rugged external design, the 21st century modernizations would include a computerized glass cockpit, intelligence sensors and smart bomb-dropping capabilities. Boeing indicates that international interest in restarting production is growing, to compete with other light attack aircraft such as the T-6B Texan II, A-67 Dragon and the MB-314 Super Tucano. On 3 February 2010, during the Singapore Air Show, Boeing announced that the international interest for the aircraft was such that it would go on with its development even in the case it failed to win the USAF tender for 100 light attack armed reconnaissance aircraft. Design. The OV-10 has a central nacelle containing pilots and car guard, and twin booms containing twin turboprop engines. The visually distinctive item of the aircraft is the combination of the twin booms with the horizontal stabilizer that connects them. The aircraft's design supports effective operations from forward bases. The OV-10 could perform short takeoffs and landings, including on aircraft carriers and large-deck amphibious assault ships without using catapults or arresting wires. Further, the OV-10 was designed to take off and land on unimproved sites. Repairs can be made with ordinary tools. No ground equipment is required to start the engines, and, if necessary, the engines will operate on high-octane automobile fuel with only a slight loss of power. The aircraft has responsive handling and can fly for 5.5 hours with external fuel tanks. The cockpit has extremely good visibility for a tandem pilot and co-pilot, provided by a wrap-around greenhouse that is wider than the fuselage. With the second seat removed, it can carry 3,200 pounds of cargo, 5 paratroopers, a 2-liter patients and an attendant. Empty weight is 6,969 pounds. Normal operating fueled weight with 2 crew is 9,908 pounds. Maximum takeoff weight is 14,446 pounds. The bottom of the fuselage contains sponsons or stub wings that improve flight performance by decreasing aerodynamic drag underneath the fuselage. The sponsons were mounted horizontally on the prototype. Testing caused them to be redesigned for production aircraft. The downward angle assured that stores carried on the sponsons jettisoned cleanly. Normally 4 7.62mm M60C machine guns were carried on the sponsons, with the M60Cs accessed through a large forward opening hatch on the top of each sponson. The sponsons also had 4 racks to carry bombs, pods or fuel. The wings outboard of the engines contain 2 additional racks, 1 per side. Racked armament in the Vietnam War was usually 7-shot 2.75 in rocket pods with white phosphorus marker rounds or high-explosive rockets, or 5 in 4-shot Zuni rocket pods. Bombs, ADS-IDS air-delivered, para-dropped unattended seismic sensors, Mk6 battlefield illumination flares, and other stores were carried as well. Operational experience showed that there were some weaknesses in the OV-10's design. It is significantly underpowered. This contributed to crashes in Vietnam in sloping terrain because the pilots could not climb fast enough. While specifications state that the aircraft could reach 26,000 feet, in Vietnam the aircraft could reach only 18,000 feet. Also, no OV-10 pilot survived ditching the aircraft. Operational history. The OV-10 served in the U.S. Air Force, U.S. Marine Corps, and U.S. Navy, as well as in the service of a number of other countries. A total of 81 OV-10 Broncos were ultimately lost to all causes during the course of the Vietnam War, with the Air Force losing 64, the Navy 7 and the Marines 10. U.S. Marine Corps. The OV-10 was first acquired by the U.S. Marine Corps. Each of the Marine Corps' 2 observation squadrons had 18 aircraft, 9 OV-10s and 9 OV-10Ds night observation aircraft. A Marine Air Reserve observation squadron was also established. The OV-10 operated as a forward air controller and was finally phased out of the Marine Corps in 1995 following its employment during Operation Desert Storm, which also saw the final combat losses of OV-10s by U.S. forces. Among these losses were 2 U.S. MC OV-10s being shot down due to a lack of effective infrared countermeasures. It was also thought that the slow speed made it more vulnerable to anti-aircraft weapons. Forward air control passed mostly to ground units with laser designators and digital radios and the twin-seat FA-18D Hornet S. Most operational Broncos were reassigned to civil government agencies in the U.S. while some were sold to other countries. The U.S. Marine Corps OV-10 Night Observation Gunship System program modified two OV-10s to include a turreted forward-looking infrared sensor, laser target designator and turreted 20mm XM197 gun slave to the FLIR aim point. NOGS succeeded in Vietnam, but funds to convert more aircraft were not approved. NOGS evolved into the NOS OV-10D, which included a laser designator, but no gun. U.S. Air Force. The USAF acquired the Bronco primarily as an FAC aircraft. The first combat USAF OV-10s arrived in Vietnam on 31 July 1968 as part of Operation Combat Bronco, an operational testing and evaluation of the aircraft. These test aircraft were attached to the 19th Tactical Air Support Squadron, 504th Tactical Air Support Group at Bien Hoa Air Base in South Vietnam. The test roles included the full range of missions then assigned to FAC aircraft, including day and night strike direction, gunship direction, bomb damage assessment, visual reconnaissance, aerial artillery direction, and as escorts for aircraft engaged in Operation Ranch Hand. The aircraft's ability to generate smoke internally was utilized for strike direction and, in four specific instances under conditions of reduced visibility, the smoke was seen by strike aircrafts before the Depicted. Operation Combat Bronco ended on 30 October 1968. After the end of Combat Bronco, the USAF began to deploy larger numbers to the 19th TAS, 20th TAS, and 4 out-of-country missions to the 23D TAS. The 23D TAS conducted Operation Igloo White, Operation Prairie Fire, Daniel Boone, and other special operations missions. From April to June 1969, the USAF conducted an operational exercise called Misty Bronco in South Vietnam's 3rd Corps Tactical Zone to evaluate the OV-10A's performance as a light strike aircraft. The results were positive, and as of October 1969 all USAF OV-10s were to be armed with their internal 318 M60C machine guns, which had generally been left out during the Combat Bronco evaluations and subsequent deployment. High explosive 2.75-in rockets were also authorized for use against ground targets. In 1971, the 23D TASS's OV-10A Broncos received modifications under Project Pave Nail, carried out by LTV Electro Systems during 1970. These modifications primarily included the addition of the Pave Spot Target Laser Designator Pod, as well as a specialized night periscope and LORAN equipment. The call sign Nail was the radio handle of the squadron. These aircraft supported interdiction of troops and supplies on the Ho Chi Minh Trail by illuminating targets for laser-guided bombs dropped by McDonnell F-4 Phantom IIs. After 1974, these aircraft were converted back to an unmodified OV-10A standard. At least 157 OV-10s were delivered to the USAF before production ended in April 1969. The USAF lost 64 OV-10 Broncos during the war, to all causes. In the late 1980s, the USAF started to replace their OV-10s with OA-37B and OA-10A aircraft. Unlike the Marine Corps, the USAF did not deploy the Bronco to the Middle East in response to the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. as it believed that the OV-10 was too vulnerable. The final two USAF squadrons equipped with the Bronco, the 19th and 21st Tactical Air Support Squadron, retired the OV-10 on 1 September 1991. In 2012, $20 million were allocated to activate an experimental unit of two OV-10s, acquired from NASA and the State Department. Starting in May 2015, these were deployed to Iraq on combat missions against ISIS, flying more than 120 combat sorties over 82 days. It is speculated they provided close air support for Special Forces missions. The experiment ended satisfactorily, but an Air Force spokesman stated it remains unlikely they will invest in reactivating the OV-10 on a regular basis because of the overhead cost of operating an additional aircraft type. U.S. Navy. The U.S. Navy formed Light Attack Squadron 4, the Black Ponies, on 3 January 1969, and operated in Vietnam from April 1969 to April 1972. The Navy used the Bronco OV-10A as a light ground attack aircraft for interdiction of enemy logistics and fire support of Marines, SEALs and Naval Riverine Force vessels. It succeeded in this role, although the U.S. Navy did lose 7 OV-10s during the Vietnam War to various causes, other than OV-10 fleet replacement training done in cooperation with Air Anti-Submarine Squadron 41 at NAS North Island, California. -4 Vatican Liras was the only squadron in the U.S. Navy to ever employ the OV-10, and it was decommissioned shortly following the end of the Vietnam War. -4 Vatican Liras. Surviving OV-10s were subsequently transferred to the Marine Corps. Colombia. In 1991, the USAF provided the Colombian Air Force with 12 OV-10 as. Later, 3 ex-USMCA models were also acquired to provide parts support. Colombia operates the aircraft in a coin roll against an active insurgency. At least one aircraft has been lost in combat. The remaining OV-10s were upgraded to OV-10D standard in November 2015, and after 24 years of service, the Colombian Air Force retired all of its remaining OV-10 aircraft. Germany. The OV-10B variant was produced for Germany to use as target tug. 18 aircraft were delivered in the late 60s, and they were equipped with target towing equipment inside the fuselage. A clear dome replaced the rear cargo door, and a rear seat was installed in the cargo bay to look backwards out of the dome. After a long career, the Bronco was replaced by the Pilatus PC-9 in 1990, and all aircraft were retired and sent to various museums, technical schools, and used as ABDR. Indonesia purchased 12 OV-10F aircraft and operates them in coin operations similar to the U.S. Navy's Vietnam missions with the Broncos, but have retrofitted 50 Browning heavy machine guns in place of the 318 machine guns. These aircraft were based in Lanut Abdul Rahman Saleh Air Force Base in Malang, East Java, and were vital in the invasion of East Timor and ensuing coin operations. In 1977, they were also used during the aerial bombardments of Amungma villages near Freeport McMoran area of operations, West Papua, in response to OPM attacks on the mining company facilities, and of Dani villages in Balyam Valley, also in West Papua, in response to rebellion against enforced participation in the Indonesian general election. Due to the lack of U.S. bombs, the Indonesian Air Force modified the bomb racks to be able to carry Russian bombs. The Indonesian Air Force plans to replace their OV-10Fs with Embraer Super Tucanos following a fatal accident on 23 July 2013. Morocco. The Royal Moroccan Air Force acquired 6 former U.S. Marine Corps OV-10s in 1981. based in Marrakesh Mainara Airport. These were employed in counter-insurgency operations against Polisario forces in the Western Sahara War using rocket pods and gun pods. One was shot down in 1985. Philippines. The Philippine Air Force received 24 OV-10s from U.S. stocks in 1991, later followed by a further 9 from the United States, and 8 ex-Thai Air Force OV-10Cs in 2003-2004. The OV-10s are operated by the 16th Attack Squadron and 25th Composite Attack Squadron of the 15th Strike Wing, based in Sangley Point, Cavite. The PAF flies Broncos on search and rescue and coin operations in various parts of the Philippines. The first 2 women combat pilots in the PAF flew OV-10s with the 16th. This squadron flew anti-terrorist operations in the Jolo Islands. PAF OV-10 Broncos have been repeatedly used in airstrikes against Moro Islamic Liberation Front positions during ongoing fighting in 2011, and 2 were used in an airstrike on February 2012 which resulted in the death of 3 Abu Sayyaf and Jamar Islamah commanders, among others. Philippine Air Force OV-10s have been reportedly modified in order to employ modern smart bombs. Thailand. The Royal Thai Air Force purchased 32 new OV-10C aircraft in the early 1970s for coin usage. Reportedly Broncos won most Thai bombing competitions until F-5s became operational. At one time the RTAF flew OV-10s as air defense aircraft. In 2004, RTAF donated most of the OV-10s to the Philippines. 2 OV-10 survivors are displayed in the Tango Squadron Wing 41 Museum in Chiang Mai and the RTAF Museum in Bangkok. The remaining OV-10s will be donated to the PAF in 2011. Venezuela. The Venezuelan Air Force has operated a number of new-build OV-10s and ex-USAF OV-10s over the years. On the 27th of November 1992, the aircraft were widely used by mutinous officers who staged an attempted coup d'état T-80 against former President Carlos Andrés Pérez. The rebels dropped bombs and launched rockets against police and government buildings in Caracas. 4 Broncos were lost during the uprising, including 2 shot down by the loyalist General Dynamics F-16 Fighting Falcon. Venezuela's OV-10s are to be retired in the coming years. Originally Venezuela attempted to procure Embraer Super Tucano aircraft to replace the OV-10, but no deal was achieved, which President Chavez claimed was due to the result of pressure from the U.S. government. The Venezuelan government has decided not to replace them with new fixed-wing aircraft. Rather, the Venezuelan Air Force is replacing them with the Russian-made Mi-28 attack helicopter. Other U.S. usage. NASA has used a number of Broncos for various research programs, including studies of low-speed flight carried out with the third prototype in the 1970s, and studies on noise and wake turbulence. 1 OV-10 remained in use at NASA's Langley base in 2009, with 3 additional aircraft obtained from the Department of State formerly used in drug or eradication efforts. U.S. Department of State Air Wing. The Department of State aircraft are former Air Force OV-10A and Marine Corps OV-10D aircraft operated under contract by DynCorp International in support of U.S. drug interdiction and eradication efforts in South America. The aircraft carries civilian U.S. aircraft registration numbers and, when not forward deployed, are home-based at a DynCorp facility at Patrick Air Force Base, Florida. Bureau of Land Management. The U.S. Bureau of Land Management acquired 7 OV-10s for use as firefighting aircraft, including the YOV-10A prototype. In this role, they would lead firefighting air tankers through their intended flight path over the target area. The aircraft were operated in the basic military configurations, but with their ejection seats disabled. The aircraft's existing smoke system was used to mark the path for the following air tankers. With the age of the aircraft, spare parts were difficult to obtain, and a BLM retired the fleet in 1999. California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. The California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection has acquired a number of OV-10s, including the 6 surviving aircraft from the BLM and 13 former U.S. Marine Corps aircraft in 1993 to replace their existing Cessna 02 Skymasters as air attack aircraft. The CAL Fire Broncos fly with a crew of 2, a contract pilot and the CAL Fire ATGS or Air Tactical Group Supervisor, whose job it is to coordinate all aerial assets on a fire with the incident commander on the ground. Thus, besides serving as a tanker lead-in aircraft, the OV-10A is also the aerial platform from which the entire air operation is coordinated.